Hello viewer, the Nameless Scholar here. In this video, I wanted to talk about not just something related to Warhammer 40k, but about Warhammer 40k itself. Now, as you know me, I love Warhammer 40k, and I will always love Warhammer 40k. For there is no setting like it, and because there isn't a setting like it, people can't really let go of it. Warhammer 40k, especially the John Blanche eras of 3rd and 4th editions, and even 5th edition, is the Warhammer 40k most people know and actually love. It's not just nostalgia. Old Warhammer 40k was great, and there will never ever be another setting like Warhammer 40k. Because everything you need to know about 40k is in the famous introduction of the setting itself. And for the old time's sake, regarding my earliest videos, let me read it out loud. It is the 41st millennium. For more than 100 centuries, the Emperor of mankind has sat immobile on the golden throne of Earth. He is the master of mankind by the will of the gods, and master of a million worlds by the might of his inexhaustible armies. He is a rotting carcass writhing invisibly with power from the dark age of technology. He is the carrion lord of the vast Imperium of man, for whom 1,000 souls are sacrificed every day, so that he may never truly die. Yet even in his deathless state, the Emperor continues his eternal vigilance. Mighty battle fleets cross the demon-infested miasma of the warp, the only route between distant stars, their way lit by the Astronomicon, the psychic manifestation of the Emperor's will. Vast armies give battle in his name on uncounted worlds. Greatest amongst his soldiers are the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, bioengineered super warriors. Their comrades in arms are Legion, the Imperial Guard, and countless planetary defense forces, the ever-vigilant Inquisition, and the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, to name only a few. But for all their multitudes, they are barely enough to hold off the ever-present threat to humanity from aliens, heretics, mutants, and far, far worse. To be a man in such times is to be one amongst untold billions. It is to live in the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable. These are the tales of those times. Forget the power of technology and science, for so much has been forgotten, never to be relearned. Forget the promise of progress and understanding, for in the grim dark future, there is only war. There is no peace amongst the stars. Only an eternity of carnage and slaughter, and the laughter of thirsting gods. But the universe is a big place, and whatever happens, you will not be missed. What does this tell us? It tells us that the protagonists of Warhammer 40k are the Imperium of Man. It talks about the endless armies fighting in his name, and how the greatest of all the armies of the Imperium are the Space Marines, which means the Imperium, especially the loyalist Space Marines, are the main characters of Warhammer 40k, but everyone else is a villain to fight against the Imperium, and more importantly, the Space Marines. This right here is by design. This is the greatest strength and the greatest weakness of Warhammer 40k. It is Imperium-centric, particularly Space Marine-centric. This is one of the reasons why people say the Imperium are the good guys or bad guys of 40k, even though the telos of 40k is completely different than our own teloi, anthropology, and framework. Because, since we are humans and the setting presents itself as the story of humanity raging against the dying of the light, we are of course inclined to side with the humans by proxy, and those that don't either see the full picture or have an ulterior motive in our own world and not just 40k. This also extends to those who claim that the Imperium are the good guys. And no, instead of commenting on this video as to how the Imperium are the good guys or the bad guys, whichever your point is, I'm going to use this section of the video to tell you, the viewer, to watch my video on the Imperium as it is my best video yet, and comment on that video instead. On top of that, let me know if you want a follow-up for that video. My self-advertisement aside, this is why for years the Eldar were neglected, why even to an extent orcs and some parts of the Tau were neglected. Because 40k is Imperium-centric by default. The Xenos don't sell well, even Chaos sells more because Chaos is inseparable from the origin story of the Imperium. Which leads me to my next point. The Horus Heresy, or 30k, is the superior setting to 40k, because the Horus Heresy doubles down on the Imperium-centric nature of the setting. It's why, say, a novel series based on the fall of the Eldar or the War in Heaven would never work. It can be written, but it would be very difficult to pull off, and Black Library has more misses than hits. Tell me, aside from the big ones like the Eisenhorn Omnibus, most Horus Heresy novels, the Night Lord's Omnibus, the Chronicles of Malus Darkblade, and stuff like that, how many other Black Library books did you actually like? Again, excluding the big ones that I haven't named among my examples, that is. Anyways, the Horus Heresy is the tale of how the light started dying in the first place. It is a Shakespearean tragedy where brother turns against brother, and how chaos forever ruins the vision of the Emperor, whom himself is a flawed person. Even he isn't perfect. The Loyalist Primarchs aren't perfect. The traitors are all tragedies in their own right, with most of them you can map out to figures of mythology with some exceptions. Fulgrim is Griffith. He is the first exception. Perturabo is Prometheus, albeit more resentful and with an identity crisis, but details. Conrad Kurz is Vlad the Impaler, whom is the second exception. Angron is Spartacus, whom is the final exception. Mortarion is Baldur. Magnus the Red is Odin. Horus is, well, Horus from Egyptian mythology. Lorgar is Judas Iscariot, and Alpharius is the serpent in the Garden of Eden. The Horus Heresy is the tale of Space Marine versus Space Marines, how the traitors came to become traitors and slaves to darkness, whereas the Loyalists trying to defend themselves and the Emperor, where ultimately it ends with Horus dying upon his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, with the Emperor being mortally wounded and mummified upon the Golden Throne. It's why, when talking about the Horus Heresy, it always eventually becomes a matter of who's your favorite Primarch, who's your favorite named character. The Primarchs are the stuff of legends, the genetically engineered sons of the Emperor and the generals of the Space Marine legions. Every Space Marine is in the likeness of their gene fathers, who are in the image of the Emperor. They are an integral part of the story of the Horus Heresy, as they are the main actors in the tragedy, with unforgettable side characters like Sigismund, Raldoron, Sevatar, Karn, and many more. Even in modern 40k, you realize how the discourse is about which Primarch is going to return next, which, yes, side update, I was all but wrong in this video where I said that Jagatai Khan will be the next Loyalist Primarch to return, but it seems that Rogel Dorn will have that title. Besides, that video was essentially a bet against God and I lost. Simple as. That side tangent aside, this is why the Horus Heresy is the superior setting to 40k. Well, because it knows that the Imperium are the protagonists, and it focuses on the most important part of the Imperium, mainly the Space Marines, both Loyalist and Traitor. In 40k, the Loyalist Space Marines are Player 1, the rest of the Imperium are Player 2, Chaos is Player 3, and Xenos are Player 4. One of the problems I have with the Primarchs returning to 40k is that because of their nature, the discourse becomes which Primarch will return, turning 40k into not just an even lamer version of the Horus Heresy, but also an even lamer version of pro wrestling. At least the Horus Heresy is mainly Space Marine centric with the rare occasion of the alien, whereas in 40k it introduces all these named characters for the Xenos and they are simply just dropped. The Inari is a good example. So is the Silent King. Although I believe that 40k was always meant to be a stagnant setting, let's put aside my disdain English for the story moving forward, and let's say hypothetically, for the sake of the argument, that the story should or can move on. It doesn't matter. I would have preferred that the story didn't move forward with the Primarchs returning. So like, even if it did, I would have preferred it with the Primarchs not returning pretty much. Neither loyalist nor traitor. But we cannot have that because GW has turned 40k into Age of Sigmar in space. That's why Warhammer 40k did not lost its grim dark. It just lost the main aspects that made 40k, well, 40k. That's why I'm against the story moving forward, and that's why 40k should have remained the setting, or it should have been given the of mice and men treatment that fantasy had. But that's not all, because I'm also going to compare Warhammer 40k to Warhammer Fantasy. In Warhammer Fantasy Battle, there isn't one main protagonist, as much as the High Elves are considered to be the poster boys of fantasy, even more so than the Empire of Man itself. Warhammer Fantasy is set in one world, but it is grander and its factions all have equal stakes. It is an acquired taste, but once you acquire it, you realize that despite being a question of how much can we rip off of Tolkien and Moorcock and get away with it, Warhammer Fantasy is a very well-written setting, despite how off-putting the map can be due to how much it resembles our real-world map. Warhammer Fantasy isn't even strictly a story of good versus evil. Now, there are aspects of it, but Warhammer Fantasy is a story of flawed yet aspiring civilizations and species, putting aside their differences to fight against the force of darkness. As oxymoronic as it sounds, it is a setting where Michael Moorcock meets J.R.R. Tolkien. Every faction gets their own cut, whereas in 40k, the Imperium gets most of the pie and the rest gets scrap. That wasn't the case in fantasy until Old World, where the legacy armies might as well not even exist. I'm still counting down the clock until Old World 2nd Edition gets announced and everybody starts raging, provided that they aren't still playing 8th Edition Fantasy Battle. Anyways, that aside, Warhammer Fantasy's factions got equal care and lore, it's that they didn't get equal care, model range, and even rules-wise. Armies that consistently sold well like the High Elves and the Empire constantly got new models and updates, while factions like Bretonnia and Tomb King's models, ranges, and rules were neglected for years. In the case of Bretonnia, both, with Tomb King's only models-wise. I mean, Chaos Dwarves were stuck with their first and only rulebook and models that were older than me, for crying out loud. Alongside that, there are many more interesting named characters in fantasy with much more variety than in 40k. 40k's named characters, especially if they are not Space Marines, are acquired tastes. If they are not a Space Marines, they are most likely on the side of the Imperium, such as Caiaphas Cain and Gaunt's Ghosts. Characters like Talos Valkorin and Lotara Saren are the exceptions, not the rule, whereas the Xenos are an acquired taste. The Eldar are a joke, the Orcs are the haha meme faction, Tyranids and the Genestealer cults, as far as I know, don't have named characters, and the Tau and the Necrons alongside the Leagues of Votann are an acquired taste. Whereas Warhammer Fantasy have interesting characters across all of its factions. Malice Darkblade from the Dark Elves, Rapunz the Lyonesse of Bretonnia because she's practically Jeanne d'Arc. Vlad and Isabella von Kostein are fan favorites alongside Emperor Karl Franz. The twins Tyrion and Teclis from the High Elves, Greece's Goldtooth of the Ogre Kingdoms. I mean, Gotrek and Felix! Fantasy revolves around these figures of myth, which is another reason why the Horus Heresy is superior to 40k. Horus Heresy revolves around the Primarchs and named characters like Sigismund and Sevatar, who are the figures of myth. The reason why 40k works better as a stagnant setting is that the Primarchs, both loyalists and traitors, were the stuff of legends from a bygone era. The traitor Primarchs that were known to be alive were always technically active, but they were half the time too lazy to do anything really. And characters like Ozek Ahriman, even Marneus Kelgar, Eldrad Ulfran, and Gaskul were the new figures of myth after the true stuff of legends had all either died or disappeared 10,000 years ago. Whereas in Warhammer Fantasy, the named characters, the ones that existed for millennia and the ones like that are new, were all the figures of myth that make the setting alive, just like it is with the Horus Heresy. And on top of that, you know, the whole to be a man in such times is to be one amongst untold billions. So another reason why 40k shouldn't really be like Hero Hammer centric. In conclusion, because of 40k's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness, which is 40k by nature is Imperium-centric, Warhammer 40k is not a perfect setting. It never will be. Horus Heresy is the superior setting and story because it doubles down on 40k's greatest strength, whereas Warhammer Fantasy Battle is superior as a setting to 40k because despite their differences in what they are about, it is a superior setting because whereas the Horus Heresy doubles down on its greatest strength, Warhammer Fantasy mitigates its weaknesses by making sure that all of the factions get equal care in the lore, even if not in models. But I'm not a graybeard in fantasy, nor am I a lore expert English. I am gradually entering and I have yet to encounter anything like it. So I am also saying this as an outsider looking in, whom got into fantasy later with hindsight. Anyways guys, this is going to be it for this video. I am the Nameless Scholar. And remember,
apathy is death.